In this step, we're going to make this form actually do something. What I mean by that is we're going to take the data that someone types into this form and tell the form where to send it and how to get it there. In order to do this, I'm going to replace this form tag with something actually called form tag. So I'm going to type form tag do, and then I'll end it down here. I need to do one more thing. To start off with, I'm just going to put google.com in here. Now, let's talk about what this means. So notice that this is in clown hats. When it has an equal sign, you might call it Cthulhu because it looks sort of like tentacles if you turn your head sideways. This is what's called a Rails helper. A Rails helper is something that renders some HTML for you. In this case, the HTML it's rendering, this looks perfectly fine, no difference. But if we look at the source code, we can see that the source code has changed considerably. Where originally we just had a plain little form tag, now we have all of this stuff, which I definitely didn't write in here. Instead, Rails included it for me. Let me talk about what each of these different things do. This second hidden input field, this authenticity token, it includes a big long string right here, which is used for security purposes to prevent someone from spoofing a form submission. That is, when you submit this form, Rails is going to check to see whether or not this string is present, and if it isn't, it's going to assume someone is trying to spoof your form submission. That is, they're trying to send the submission from another computer in your stead, basically fraudulently pretending to be you. When you submit this form on your own computer and everything's going fine, Rails will see that this string has been included and it will know that you are who you say you are. This first hidden input, this isn't too important. It's just something that has to do with making sure that what data you submit with this form is translated correctly, whether you're using a Mac computer, a Windows computer, some other kind of computer. It makes sure all the characters are encoded properly. Then in this form tag, the important things here are method and action. Action, as you can see, is a URL. This is the URL to which the data should be submitted when this form is submitted. So where the data should be sent. When someone types in a list title down here and clicks submit, where should that data go? Currently, it would go to Google. This isn't what we're going to leave it as, but I just want to show that this is a URL in here. This method is post. Now, I'll talk about what post means in a second, but first I'm going to change this to /new. That is, when someone submits this form, I want the data to go to localhost 3000 /new. Now, we're on that right now, but you can actually make one URL do several completely different things just depending on how data is sent to it. I'm going to go back to roots. Notice that for these guys, these are both get. I'm going to create a post new, and then this is going to go to lists, and it will go to create. So it's going to go into the list controller, into a create method, and then what I'm going to do right now is just have this show you what data was submitted with the form. All right, so now I'm going to demonstrate exactly what all of this means. If I go back here and type something in and click submit, there we go. This is all of the data that was submitted when I sent that form. You'll see that authenticity token, this UTF-8 thing, that was the first hidden input field. Rails also includes what controller we're using, what action, that is what method in the controller is being operated right now, and then also the data from the form. So there's title test. Let me change it to something else. I'll change it banana, and now we should see that title is banana. Now I'm at localhost 3000 /new, but if I just go to this URL again, I get a completely different page. That's because I'm making the request to this page in two completely different ways. When you type something into your address bar up here, you're making what's called a GET request. When you submit data, you're making what's called a POST request. They're both ways of making requests to server. That is, telling a server, hey, I'm sending you some data and I want to get some data back. But the server can respond in completely different ways depending on whether it's GET or POST. These are called HTTP methods. HTTP, that should look familiar. You usually see that at the beginning of URLs that you type into your address bar. HTTP, that stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, that's this whole system of sending data somewhere and then getting data back. This is called the request and response cycle. GET and POST are two HTTP methods. Again, whenever you type something into your address bar, so whether it's google.com or facebook.com or what have you, you're making a GET request. When you send data somewhere, most of the time you're making a POST request. If you're wondering why it's called GET versus POST, that's because a GET request is usually just used for getting data, whereas a POST request is used for posting data. What's the English definition of post? It means to put information up somewhere. That is, you're sending information someplace. So we're making one URL do two completely different things depending on how that URL is accessed. So again, if I just refresh this page or just type in this URL in here, I'm making a GET request. If I type something in here, I'll put spatula and submit that. Now I'm making a POST request, and so this URL responds in a completely different way. Notice that if you're on a page where you've made a POST request, when you refresh, so I just hit Command R in Chrome, often you'll see this box. And you get this box because in order to refresh this page, it will need to submit that data again. That's fine for this Rails app, but if, say, you're making a payment on some website, that's a POST request, and if you were to submit that form twice by refreshing the page, that could be problematic. And so Chrome just has this little alert box pop up just to make sure you don't submit sensitive information twice by accident. All right, so that's it for this step. Right now, we're just sending data somewhere. In this next step, oh, and before I forget, so you saw me render some text before. So I could just do hello right here. And then if I refresh this, I just see hello. Here I'm rendering JSON. That's JavaScript object notation. And so you can put whatever you want in here and it will turn it into JSON. I have a Chrome extension that formats JSON in sort of a pretty way, which is why it shows up like this. On your computer, you would probably see something like this if you didn't have that Chrome extension built right in. In this case, the thing that we're turning into JSON is this request.params thing. I mentioned a request and response cycle before. The request, that's the data that's coming in. And we're looking at this params thing inside of that request that's coming in. Notice these curly braces, it's an object or a hash, and we'll be able to treat it as such in Rails. But that's going to be the next step. For right now, we're just working on submitting data. In the next step, we're going to process that data. I'm going to save this commit as making new list form post some data.